Welcome YouTubers to another chapter of vintage controllers at the Museum of Traffic Control. This one we'll showcase today has a complete cabinet with it. When I received it, it had the controller within the cabinet that was pretty much built for this particular series of controllers. The cabinet itself is pretty cool. It's cast aluminum, and it's got the Econolite and traffic control as part of the casting, so the letters kind of stand out in the face of the cabinet. And just kind of a unique looking cabinet. At the top it's got the fan, which is kind of the round looking thing up there, and it's got the police door that has the police flash and auto switches and the on-off switches, and I can show you those here in a little bit. So overall it's just kind of a fun cabinet. Came with the pole, everything to make it work, make it stand up and operate. So let's open her up and see what we got. Before I do that, let me show you the police panel. So the police would have a key to get in. It's a little skeleton type key, and so they would open the door. And there usually be two switches. Sometimes there'd be a third switch. What we have here, we'll zoom in a little bit, is similar to the auxiliary panel in that we have the auto flash switch, which if you need to turn the intersection into a flash, you would just flip that. Or if the signals need to be turned off for some reason, that's what this switch would do. This switch energizes, you can probably hear a little rattling in there, energizes that mercury relay, which shuts the signals off. And then when he releases it, turns the signals back on. And then this would be into flash, which turns the signals off and redirects the power to the flasher. The blank here would be for a manual control. And some of the units you'll see in the future, for future cabinets I have, there is a remote button that the officer can use. The wire would come out of here, and the button would just sit in this little space here. He would flip this switch, which would go from auto to manual, and then from the remote control there would be a bunch of cord that he could pull out, and then there's a thumb button type of thing to advance the signal one interval at a time. And then when he's done, he just pushes the wiring back in there. The little unit kind of sits here, and then you can close the door. Okay, so this is the inside of the cabinet, and it's all pretty much original stuff. Haven't made any modifications to it. It still runs like it did on the street. This particular cabinet would have been probably from the later 60s, maybe early 70s. It was a time when the NEMA standards, which are the plugs that plug into these units, were they weren't standardized. So the plug on the front here has just a military pin-out connector that's just kind of user or the manufacturer's discretion of what they wanted, what pins on what. So there weren't any standards at the time, so pretty much they would put things on whatever pin they would, so you couldn't swap with another manufacturer's controller or any of that because there wasn't anything that was similar to that. So let's go ahead and zoom in on some of this stuff, and I'll show you kind of around the cabinet. The top here we have the load switches. This is what controls the actual signals, the high voltage signal. So the controller itself puts out low voltage, usually 24 volt or so, and then that controls these load switches, which in turn controls 110, 120 volt for the signals themselves. Over here is the flasher unit. So when you put the signals into flash, this is the unit that controls that. Also inside there is, let me get a little closer, flash transfer relay next to it there. Alright, put my finger in here, right there. And then this is the mercury switch. So when you would turn the signals off, it's like a big relay, and it would cut the power to the signals. So they'll shut completely off. Next we have a loop detector. So this would be in the road. For this particular cabinet or controlled intersection, it was a non-actuated through phase and a actuated side phase with a pedestrian side phase. So when we get to this would have been the vehicle actuation part of the side street. So here's the controller itself, and if I can get a little more straighter here on the tripod. Pardon the moving around a little bit. Okay, got a little bit of sun glare from the window too, but so on the left of this one is our non-actuated main street phase. You've got your initial green, and these switches were kind of like thumb wheel switches. I'll put my finger in here so you can see it. So we can switch, to any timing just by flipping the thumb wheel. In this particular case, there's 23 seconds of minimum green. And then there is a pedestrian clearance phase for the non-actuated phase. This phase would rest and walk until it got a call from the side street. So then it would have 12 seconds of flashing don't walk, which is the pedestrian clearance, followed by 4 seconds of yellow and a second of all red. The second panel is blank because it doesn't have actuated PEDs for phase 1. It's non-actuated phase, so the pedestrian light follows the signal. It goes walk every time, and so there's not a need for the push button on that particular one. And the side street, which is be phase 2 or B, sometimes in those days they did phase A and phase B, would have a recall switch. So if you wanted the signals to bounce back and forth, you'd put them on recall. Otherwise, the detector within the controller would either have lock or non-lock. Typically, it would be on non-lock, which this one is. Just the angle of the camera looks like it's on lock. And so that way, if a vehicle enters the side street and then exits right away, like making a right turn, it doesn't lock the signal into changing for the side street. It'll clear it out and reset it. If it's locked, then it will, no matter what, if the vehicle leaves, it will still change the signals. So the call light is what is actually lights up when the vehicle is in the detection area. Then you've got your 5 seconds of initial green. So even if there isn't a vehicle in the area, it'll give at least 5 seconds of green time. Vehicle extension, this is time between actuations. So if a vehicle leaves the loop and another vehicle enters the detection loop, then within the 2 seconds it'll still hold the green. Up to a maximum of this particular one is 30 seconds before it forces it off to yellow. You can also energize one of the pins on the controller for a time of day type of thing if you want to extend the green to 40 seconds. And then there's the 4 seconds of yellow and a second of all red. That's the clearance phase, the all red. Actually, yellow and red are all clearance, but you could either have just yellow to bounce straight to green on the side street, or you can have an all red period where everything is stopped. For the pedestrians, again, we have it on, well, right now I have it on recall because I'm enjoying having the signals kind of go back and forth. And I don't really have well, I do have a button, but it's kind of one of those things that I could have it set up that way for a pedestrian if I want, but it's kind of nice to watch them cycle back and forth. So it's on recall right now. We've got, and when a pedestrian pushes the button, we've got the call light that comes on. We've got 8 seconds of pedestrian walk time, followed by 12 seconds of clearance time. And again, if this clears out, like if you've gone through the 8 seconds plus the 12 seconds, that's 20 seconds of pedestrian time, and you still got vehicles coming through, the light will just stay green and don't walk until the maximum 30 seconds has elapsed, and then it'll be forced to go back to the non-actuated phase. This next panel shows the action of the signals. Here again, we've got phase A and phase B. before they started numbering them. You've got your extension limit, so when you've reached the limit of the extension, that light will flash. You've got your walk and your pedestrian clearance, which is the flashing don't walk. Your initial time, the minimum green. Rest time, that's if there isn't any side street activity and the signal has gone through its minimum green, then it'll just rest in green and walk until somebody actuates the side street, whether it's a pedestrian or a vehicle. You've got your vehicle extension limit, which flashes, and then you've got yellow and then all red. So it kind of shows you what's going on in the intersection through those lights. And then we've got fuses for the various components, the 5-volt DC, 24-volt DC. You've got your 115 for the power of the controller. And then instead of a door switch, a lot of the newer controller cabinets, when you close the door, then whatever lights were on the controller will shut off. This particular one, in the old days, you'd have to turn it off yourself. In fact, when I received this cabinet, everything worked great except for one thing, and that was a few of these lamps were burned out. So luckily I found a source where I could get them and put them back in, and now the lamps work. But I guess the tech that was running this could just left it on, so the lamps would burn out over time, especially the ones that were on all the time. Right here is the Econolite Failsafe unit. This is a conflict monitor, so you don't get two greens. It keeps the electronics honest. So that's what they used at that time. So then there was a reset button, and the failsafe would turn red if there was a problem, and it would click everything off on the controller and put the intersection into red flash, red and yellow flash, I guess, with the time yellow for Main Street and red for side street. Here's all your terminals. So you've got your low voltage terminals that connect different things, your high voltage terminals at the bottom, which were the lamps for the traffic signals. This little box on the left, go ahead and ignore. That's just the power supply for my railroad crossing signal. Just wanted to find a place that I could put it and not have to have it setting out. So it's in this cabinet, so it's not native to this cabinet or anything. So it's just a housing for that. Inside you'd have your tech panel. Sometimes they'd call it auxiliary panel, so that the tech could run things. Let me get here closer. So you've got your auto and flash switch, so you can put the intersection into flash. You can turn your controller off from here. And when you do that, if you still have it in auto, it will put the intersection into flash just by losing power to the controller. Your main power switch on and off. You've got your test buttons for the phase B, which is the side street, and the pedestrian push buttons on phase B. So you can actuate those from this panel, so the tech doesn't have to go around to the intersection and push all the buttons. Although it's good for him to do that to make sure the buttons all work. And then this little lamp here is an add-on that I put in. It just was an outlet, but it was kind of nice to have. When I had this controller outside in California, it was kind of dark, so it was, if I opened up the cabinet, I just twisted that lamp in and had a little light on the subject. So that's kind of the inner workings of that. Next we'll go ahead and turn it on and show you the different sequences. Okay, now I'm going to show you, I've got all my signals on voice command, so I will turn this on and light it up. Alexa, turn on 1. Alright, so we just lit up everything, got the controller started. So it starts with clearing out phase A, the non-actuated phase, and is servicing B right now. Again, I have it on recall, so it's going to keep servicing B until I turn off the recall switch on the pedestrian, B pedestrian line, which is right up here. So we're going through yellow, red, and now we're back on the main phase. You can see the lights that are up is call. That always lights up in a non-actuated phase. And then the call on the B is also lit because it is being called for once it clears. We're in phase A right now with a walk, and the minimum time is timing, the initial green. From here it should go, let's see, goes to the pedestrian clearance and the extension time, of which actuated phase there really isn't. So they're kind of locked together on this phase. And then from here it'll go to yellow, and then to red. Oops, there's red. Alright, so now we're back to B. What I'm going to do is unrecall this. So it's servicing walk. Now don't walk. It's timing the max time, and then it'll, when it reaches the max time limit, since there aren't any more vehicles, it'll go yellow and then red. Okay, now in this state we don't see a call on phase B because I turned off the recall. So now it should just time out the phase A with the walk, and then it should go to rest here in a moment after it times the 23 seconds from the initial green, the minimum green. So we should go, watch it go to rest here. There, and it just went to rest. So now in this state it will just sit like this until either a vehicle comes or a pedestrian. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a pedestrian, and I'm going to push. Let me show you on the camera, and then we'll swing back over here. So over here, as you can see, I have a pedestrian push button, and I'm going to push that, but I want you to be able to see what happens when I push it. It'll kind of do what it did before, but suddenly there'll be a call. So I'm Joe Pedestrian coming up, and I push the button, and there we go. So it's now saying don't walk on the main phase. It locks the call in because it is a pedestrian versus a car. And then we'll go to yellow, and then to all red. And now we're servicing phase B, which the pedestrian is going. So they got the walk signal. Meantime, cars, as they come, will hit the detector, and they'll keep resetting the presence detector until they leave, and the light will stay flashing don't walk here until the pedestrian's done, and then it will go to yellow, and then to all red, and back to phase A. Now if I'm a vehicle, I can service it. Let's see here. I can do, I've got a loop detector here at the bottom. I could try to run something here close to it and see if it detects it. There we go. So now I'm a vehicle. You can see the vehicle, or the detector light is on. And there's no pedestrians this time, so you shouldn't get any walk signal. So now we're going to service phase B with just a car. There we go. So we've got the initial going, and now it should go to extension. And I just undid it, so it's yellow now, and then all red. So that's kind of how that works. So when a car would come or leave the intersection. So now it's timing the walk and initial again. Do it one more time. Again, we've got the call light going up, on. Yellow. All red. Okay, so now we're servicing the side street. We're giving it its guaranteed minimum green. And it's holding here now until I release like I did before. So I'm going to release it. Oh, maybe I am. There we go. And we go yellow. And then back to the main street. So, it's kind of the long and the short of it. Here are a couple of backup controllers I have. This one here is one very similar to the one you just saw in operation, a 2004 with the non-actuated phase A, and then the actuated vehicle and pedestrian phase B. So this one's pretty much the same. And then next to it here, we've got a 2004-5, it says at the top. This particular one was for a isolated pedestrian phase, So the signal non-actuated phase, well actually this was an actuated signal phase because it has the extension limit, or green max we call it in newer days, and it has the vehicle extension and all that for an actuated phase. So it would have a vehicle phase, and then even though it says APED, this particular one would go to a isolated or delayed or a pedestrian phase. So it would turn off or clear the main signal for vehicles and then have service a pedestrian signal. So that's kind of the two here. I also have a book here on it. This is book 1 of 3. I wish I had 2 and 3, but I've only got book 1. But it does kind of give you general information about these controllers. It's chock full of cool stuff. The actuated, the semi-actuated controllers, the actuated controllers, shows just what they're supposed to do. The different examples. And then also, the part I was kind of fumbling over her a little bit is the other controller I showed you is called a mid-block controller. It says it's a model D2008, which is interesting because mine says it's a 2004-5, but it says that there is a non-actuated vehicle module, but mine's actuated, and then one exclusive one, which is the other one I had, and the 2 blank phase modules we placed in the phase A positions, and that's what we had here. So it was, I guess, used for a mid-block intersection. So anyway, kind of cool stuff. Here's a shot of the back of these. The newer style is this. It had vents on this side, but it still was more squared off. Where the older one had more rounded, and then it had a vent on the back as well as the side. So this is definitely an older unit. So just kind of fun noticing the little differences here and there between the two. Well, I hope you enjoyed your tour of the D2000's family of controllers from Econolite. Really nice units for their time, and hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe. Any comments or questions, please feel free below. I might have missed something in my description. So I hope to see you next month with another update for another controller from the Museum of Traffic Control. Have a good day.